I packed a lifetime's worth of things and vanished without a trace after my son slapped me in front of 300 guests at his wedding. My own family took his side. 8 years later, I walked back into his world as the principal investor of an exclusive Millionaires event and found a security guard staring straight at me. "Excuse me, ma'am, you look familiar," he started to say. The moment our eyes met, I knew my past and my present were about to collide in the most devastating way possible. My name is Naomi Thacker. I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how a single night destroyed everything I'd built over 35 years, and how silence became my most potent revenge. But to understand why I disappeared, you need to know who I was before I became a ghost. You need to meet the woman who sacrificed everything for a son who ultimately spit on her love. And you need to know the secret I kept for decades, the very secret that would change everything on that night of humiliation. It all started 35 years ago, the first time I held Elias in my arms. His father abandoned us when Elias was only 2 years old, leaving me alone with a baby and not a penny to my name. Oh, that's what everyone thought. They didn't know that 6 months after he walked out, my mother passed away and left me an inheritance of almost $2 million in properties and bank accounts no one knew existed. While my neighbors watched me leave every morning before dawn to clean other people's houses, while my hands grew rough ironing clothes that weren't mine, while I served coffee at a terrible diner earning tips of a few dollars. I had enough money to live like a queen for the rest of my life. But I chose not to touch it. I chose for my son to grow up seeing the sweat on my brow, the dark circles under my eyes, the real sacrifice of a working mother. I thought that was how he would learn values. I thought he would never despise anyone for their financial status. I thought that hard work would engrave in his soul the difference between having and being. How stupid I was. Elias grew up to be a good kid. He studied diligently, helped me around the apartment, and hugged me every night, thanking me for everything. I managed to get him scholarships by presenting myself as a low-income single mother. I watched him graduate with honors in business administration. I watched him land his first job at a mid-size logistics firm. Every one of his achievements was my silent victory. Every smile of his was worth more than the $2 million I kept secret. "I'm going to get you a big house one day, Mom," he would say, hugging me tight. "You'll never clean another floor again. I promise." I smiled, guarding my secret. I already owned 3 properties across 3 states that he would never know about. But it didn't matter. What mattered was his heart, his gratitude, his love. Or so I believed. Everything fell apart when Tiffany entered his life. She came in like an elegant hurricane. Straight hair that looked like expensive silk, perfect. Pulley nails, designer clothes that quietly screamed money. She came from an old money society family, the kind whose last names automatically opened doors. Her father managed million-dollar investments. Her mother, Genevieve, organized exclusive charity events where the entrance fee was $4,000 per person. The first time Elias introduced her to me, I wore my best outfit, a modest base gold suit I'd bought at a second-hand boutique, clean and meticulously ironed. Tiffany arrived in an ivory dress that probably cost more than my 6-month salary, or so she thought. "Hello, Mrs. Thacker," she said, barely extending her fingertips as if my poverty was contagious. "Elias has told me so much about you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes measured me, weighed me, and dismissed me in seconds. I shook her hand firmly, looking her straight in the eye. "It's great to meet you, Tiffany. I hope you take good care of my son." She let out a brief crystal laugh. "Oh, don't worry. In my family, we know how to take care of what's ours." What's ours, as if Elias were an acquisition. As if I were a nuisance from the past that had to be tolerated. I should have seen the red flags waving right in front of me. I should have protected my son from that woman. But I was so happy to see him in love that I ignored my instinct. The following months were a painful transformation. Elias started to change. He frequented private clubs, dinners at restaurants where the cheapest dish cost $200, and parties in mansions with gardens lit by lights that looked like crystal fireflies. Every time I called him, he was busy. Every time I visited, he was leaving for some social engagement. And when I finally saw him, there was something new in his gaze and discomfort, a shame he didn't dare to name, but which I could read perfectly. He was ashamed of me, of my simple clothes, of my working hands, of my small apartment in a neighborhood where people hung laundry on their balconies. One day, he told me that he and Tiffany were getting married. He hugged me, but the hug was different. Shorter, less warm. You're going to be in the front row, Mom. It's your day, too.
A lie. It
Wasn't my day. It wasn't even my son anymore. The wedding was planned over 6 months. Genevieve and Tiffany controlled every detail, like generals preparing for battle. I wasn't invited to any meetings. When I asked, Elias told me everything was under control, that I only needed to show up on the specified day. I obeyed because I still trusted him. I bought a cream-colored dress at a modest boutique. Nothing flashy, something dignified for the groom's mother. I kept it in my closet for weeks, ironing it, imagining that special moment. 3 weeks before the wedding, Genevieve called me. Her voice was poisoned. Honey, Naomi, dear, I need to discuss a delicate matter with you. Tell me, Genevieve, I'm here to help with whatever you need. You see, the wedding is going to be very exclusive. 300 guests from a certain social level, important people. Do you understand what I mean? It wasn't a question. It was a warning. I understand. Elias told me it would be a big celebration. There was an awkward silence. Then her voice became colder. What I'm trying to say, Naomi, is that perhaps it would be better if you kept a low profile during the event. You know, to avoid uncomfortable situations. People in our circle can be very observant. I swallowed hard. Keep a low profile. Well, perhaps you could sit in the back during the ceremony, and at the reception there's a table next to the kitchen that would be perfect for you, away from the main guests. Less pressure for you, you understand? I understood. Perfectly. They were hiding me. They were turning me into the embarrassment that needed to be concealed in the shadows. I'll be wherever my son needs me to be, I replied with a firm voice, and I hung up.
I didn't sleep that night.
For the first time in 35 years, I doubted everything. I doubted my sacrifice. I doubted my decisions. I doubted the love I thought I had planted in my son's heart. But I never imagined what was still to come. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment staring at that cream-colored dress hanging on the closet door. And for the first time in decades, I felt that everything had been in vain. 35 years of cleaning, ironing, sweating, smiling through exhaustion. And for what? So that my own son would allow me to be hidden like a dirty rag. I thought about canceling, thought about not
going.
But a part of me, that foolish part that still believed in miracles, thought that maybe Elias would react, that maybe seeing me there would remind him who raised him, who sacrificed everything for him. How naive I was until the last moment. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5 a.m. I bathed carefully and styled my hair into a simple but elegant bun. I applied light makeup, just a touch of color on my lips and cheeks. I wanted to look nice, without seeming like I was competing with anyone. I put on the cream-colored dress, some modest low-heeled taupe shoes I had polished until they shone, and a small pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother, the same pearls that were worth $10,000, but which everyone would assume were fake. Costume jewelry. I looked in the mirror and saw a dignified woman, a woman who had worked hard all her life, a woman who deserved respect. I took a cab to the ceremony. Location. It was a private estate garden outside the city, one of those places only rented for high society events. The Entrance was decorated with arches of white and champagne-colored flowers. There was an army of staff dressed in black, arranging chairs, testing microphones, and placing centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly
rent.
When I arrived, a coordinator with a tablet in hand immediately intercepted
Me.
She wore a pearl gray pantsuit and a frozen professional smile.
You.
Must be the groom's mother, she said, checking her list. Naomi, correct? Yes, that's me. Perfect. Come with me, please. I'll show you to your spot. She led me down a side path away from the main entrance where guests were starting to arrive in luxury cars.
We.
Past tables decorated with ivory linens and spectacular floral arrangements. We walked past the VIP area, which had gold chairs with velvet cushions, and kept going until we reached an area near the kitchen. There was a small table almost hidden behind some decorative plants. 2 folding chairs, a plain white tablecloth, no flowers, no candles, nothing. You'll be comfortable here, the coordinator said without looking me in the eye. Less noise, fewer people. We thought you'd prefer something quieter. I stood staring at that forgotten table and felt something break inside me. But I said nothing. I nodded, sat down, and waited. The guests began to arrive. Women in designer dresses, jewelry sparkling in the sun, elegant hats, men in suits that easily cost $4,000, Swiss watches on their wrists, Italian leather shoes. They all laughed, hugged, and greeted each other with those air kisses that rich people give without actually touching. From my hidden table I watched. No one greeted me. No one even looked at me. I was invisible, a ghost at my own son's wedding. The ceremony began with live violin music. Tiffany appeared like a vision in
white.
Her dress had a train about 10 feet long and was covered in crystals that captured every ray of light. She walked arm in arm with her father, a robust man with gray hair and a stern expression. Genevieve, her mother, cried delicately into a silk handkerchief, seated in the front row under a champagne-colored parasol. And then I saw Elias, my son, my baby, standing at the altar in an impeccable black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, a nervous smile on his face. He looked so handsome, so different from the child who used to hug me tight after nightmares. I searched for his gaze. I wanted him to see me. I wanted that moment of connection, that silent acknowledgement that I was there, that all of this was possible because of my sacrifices. But Elias never turned toward where I was sitting. His eyes remained fixed on Tiffany as she walked toward him, as if I didn't exist, as if I had never existed. The ceremony was perfect. Vows. Written by some hired poet, white gold rings with diamonds, a cinematic kiss. While the guests applauded, everything was beautiful. Everything was fake. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception area. There was a huge tent decorated like a fairy tale palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The tables were covered with ivory linens and fine porcelain dinnerware. Each setting had 3 different glasses, 3 pieces of silverware on each side of the plate. In the center were towers of white and peach-cold flowers nearly 3 feet high. I sat at my hidden table. A young waiter approached and served me water. Not wine, not champagne, just water in a plain glass. "Excuse me," I said. "Could I have a glass of wine, please?" He looked nervously toward the kitchen. Let me check with my supervisor, ma'am." He never returned. The party began with speeches. Tiffany's father spoke about the couple's brilliant future. Genevieve cried again as she talked about how Tiffany had found the perfect man. Elias's friends told funny anecdotes. From college, from trips, from moments I never knew about because they happened in that world I didn't belong to. No one mentioned my name. No one spoke of the mother who raised Elias alone. No one thanked me for 35 years of sacrifice. I was forgotten furniture in a corner. Dinner was served. Shrimp appetizer with mango salsa, fillet main course with herb crust and truffled mashed potatoes, chocolate mousse dessert with edible gold. While the guests ate and laughed, I was brought a simple dish of chicken and rice, as if I were staff, as if I didn't deserve the same food as everyone
else.
I ate in silence, every bite bitter in my throat. Then the dancing began. Elias and Tiffany opened the floor with a practice waltz. They moved, with elegance, synchronized, perfect. The guests surrounded them, applauding. The lights dimmed. Everything was magical. After the waltz, Tiffany danced with her father. Elias was supposed to dance with his mother. It was tradition. But minutes passed and no one came for
Me.
Elias was now dancing with Genevieve, then with Tiffany's grandmother, then with the aunts, but not with me. I stayed seated at my hidden table, watching my son dance with all the important women in his new life, while I remained invisible behind the decorative plants. Then I decided to get up. I wasn't going to stay hidden 1 minute longer. I walked toward the dance floor, pushing my way through the guests. Some looked at me with curiosity, others with disdain, but I kept walking until I reached Elias. He was chatting with a group of friends, a glass of champagne in hand, laughing at some joke I didn't hear. Elias, I
Called softly.
He turned around. His face changed immediately. The smile vanished. His eyes hardened.
Mom, what?
Are you doing here? Here? As if I were an intruder. As if I had no right to be at my own son's wedding. I thought maybe we could dance, I said, trying to smile. It's tradition for the groom to dance with his mother. Elias's friends went silent. I could feel their eyes evaluating me, measuring my simple dress, my modest shoes, my hair without the touch of a professional stylist. One of the women in a champagne-colored sequined dress whispered something to her partner, and they both laughed discreetly. Elias looked at me as if I had just asked him for the impossible, as if I had asked him to give up everything he had. Mom, now isn't a good time. I'm with my friends. Just one dance, I insisted, feeling my voice slightly cracking. A short dance. It's your wedding, son. Our last chance to share something special. He clenched
His jaw.
One of his friends coughed awkwardly and walked away with his partner. The others began to disperse, too, as if my presence were a bad smell, forcing them to seek fresh air.
We'll
talk about this later, Elias finally said. Right now, I have to attend to the important guests. Go back to your table. Please, go back to your table. As if I were a disobedient child. As if I had no right to stand in the same space as him. Something inside me broke at that moment. But it wasn't pain.
It was clarity.
A cold cutting clarity, like ice. All right, Elias, I said, my voice soft but firm. I understand perfectly. I turned and walked back toward my hidden table. Every step was a farewell. Every step moved me away, not just physically, but emotionally from the son I had raised or the son I thought I had raised. I sat down and watched. The party continued. The music played. People danced. They ate 5-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers. They toasted with $300 a bottle. Champagne. They took photos under perfectly positioned lights. And I was invisible. 2 more hours passed. No one approached me to talk. No family member of Tiffany's, no friend of Elias's, not. Even the waiters paid attention to me beyond collecting empty plates. Then something happened that would change everything. Genevieve stood up from her table. She wore an emerald-colored dress, covered in rhinestones, a genuine diamond necklace around her neck, and an expression of alarm on her face.
She
walked quickly toward Tiffany and whispered something in her ear. Tiffany paused. Both began searching frantically for something. Within minutes, Genevieve went up to the stage and took the microphone. The music stopped. All the guests turned toward her. Excuse the interruption, she said, her voice trembling but audible to everyone. I have to inform you that a very unfortunate incident has occurred.
My
emerald necklace, a family piece valued at $80,000, has disappeared. I left it in the bridal suite during the ceremony, and now it's gone. A murmur rippled through the ballroom. People began to look at each other with suspicion and curiosity. Genevieve continued, I understand this is uncomfortable, but I need everyone to cooperate. The security staff will discreetly check common areas. If anyone saw anything suspicious, please report it immediately. My heart started beating faster, not because I knew anything about the necklace, but because I recognized that look in Genevieve's eyes, that look that was searching for a scapegoat. And when her eyes landed on me, I knew exactly what was coming. She walked down from the stage and headed straight for my table. Tiffany and 3 of her friends followed her. Behind them came Elias, looking confused. And behind everyone, curious and murmuring, at least 50 guests approached to witness the spectacle. Naomi, Genevieve said, her voice sweet, but her eyes like steel. I need to ask you a few questions.
Of
course, I replied, remaining calm. Whatever you need. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had already chosen its prey. Were you in the bridal suite at any point this afternoon? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation in
disguise.
No, I wasn't. I've been here at my table practically all night. One of Tiffany's friends, a tall woman with platinum blonde hair, stepped forward. I saw her, she said, pointing at me with a perfectly manicured finger. I saw her near the restrooms about 2 hours ago. She was walking quickly. I went to the restroom. Yes, I replied, feeling the trap closing like any normal person would. That doesn't mean I entered the bridal suite. Genevieve took one more step closer. She was so near now I could smell her expensive perfume, a fragrance that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Naomi, I understand your financial situation is complicated. I know you've worked very hard all your
life.
I know things haven't been easy for you, and I understand being surrounded by such luxury can be tempting. Blood rushed to my head. She was implying I had stolen the necklace in front of everyone, in front of my
son.
I didn't touch your necklace, Genevieve. I didn't even know you'd left it somewhere. Tiffany stepped forward. Then, her eyes, which had been cold since I met her, now burned with something worse than coldness. They burned with contempt. Let's be honest, Naomi. You've been uncomfortable all night, hidden at this table. You clearly don't belong in this environment. Maybe you saw an opportunity and took it. Maybe you thought no one would notice. More guests approached. We were now the center of attention. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on the poor woman accused of stealing at her own
son's wedding.
I searched for Elias's gaze. He was standing behind Tiffany, his face pale, his fists clenched at his sides. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to tell everyone that his mother would never steal anything. But Elias remained
silent.
Mom, he finally said, his voice weak. Just let them check your
purse.
If you have nothing to hide, there's no problem, right? Those words sliced through me like knives.
My own. Sans doute t'aime.
My own son believed I was capable of stealing. You can check whatever you want, I said, my voice trembling with contained anger. You won't find anything because I didn't take anything. Genevieve extended her hand. Give me your purse. I handed her my small base gold clutch. She opened it in front of everyone, emptying its contents onto the table. My wallet with $30 in cash, a handkerchief, a cheap lipstick, the keys to my apartment, an old photograph of Elias when he was 5 years old. Nothing else. Genevieve frowned, clearly disappointed not to find evidence. She completely emptied my purse, checking every compartment with eager fingers. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I should have felt relief, but what I felt was something much deeper. I felt the humiliation of being searched like a criminal in front of 300 people. I felt the weight of every judgmental gaze. I felt the betrayal of my own son. who hadn't lifted a finger to stop this. Maybe you hid it somewhere else, Tiffany said in a poisonous voice. Maybe you left it in the restroom or in your car, or gave it to someone to take out of the venue. This is ridiculous, I replied, feeling tears threatening to well up. But I held them back. I wouldn't give them that pleasure. I didn't do anything, and I demand that you stop accusing me without proof. Without proof, Genevieve repeated with a bitter laugh. The proof is that you're the only person here who would have a motive to steal, the only one desperately needing money. The circle of guests around us had expanded. We were now the main show of the night. I could hear the murmurs, the speculation, the judgments. A woman in a lavender hat whispered something to her husband that ended with the word shameful. An older man shook his head while looking at me with pity mixed with disdain. Elias, please, I said, turning toward my son. Tell them you know me. Tell them I would never do something like this. He avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if he could find the words there that he dared not speak. Mom, I don't know what to think. The necklace disappeared. Someone took it, and you? He stopped, but the damage was already done.
My own son doubted me.
After 35 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of working until my hands bled, of giving him everything I had and everything I was, he doubted me.
What?
I confronted Elias, taking a step toward him. Finish the sentence. I'm poor, so I must be a thief.
Is that
what you think? Is that what you've allowed them to believe? He finally looked me in the eye, and what I saw there destroyed me. I saw shame. Not shame for doubting me, but shame of me. Shame of having me as a mother. Shame that all these important guests knew he came from a woman who cleaned floors. I'm not saying you're a thief, Mom, but you have to admit the situation looks bad. The necklace disappeared, and you were near the area. If you would just cooperate with the search. A search? I exploded. My purse was searched in front of everyone, as if I were a delinquent. What else do you want me to do, Elias? Do you want me to strip here in front of your rich friends to prove I have nothing hidden? The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Genevieve seized the moment. If you have nothing to hide, then you won't mind if we call the police. They can conduct a more thorough search, check your car, your clothes, maybe even your house. My house. The idea that these people would invade the only space that was truly mine filled me with a fury I didn't know I possessed. You're not checking anything, I said, my voice louder than intended. I am not a thief, and I will not allow you to treat me as such just because I don't have the same money as you. Tiffany let out a cruel laugh. So it's about the money. You finally admit it. You're resentful. Resentful because Elias married someone with a better standing. Resentful because you're no longer the center of his world. Her words were like whips, but there was a twisted truth in them that hurt even more. It wasn't that I was resentful about the money. I was shattered because my son had chosen this false world over the real love I had given him. It has nothing to do with money, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. It has to do with respect, with dignity, with remembering where you came from and who brought you here. Elias stepped toward me.
Mun.
His face was red, his hands were trembling, and in his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw rage. Rage directed at me. Enough, Mom. You're ruining my wedding. You're making a scene in front of all our guests. Can't you just cooperate and let this be resolved quietly? Ruining your wedding? I repeated, feeling every word was a nail in my heart. I'm ruining your wedding. Not the woman who accused me of being a thief without proof. Not the people who treated me like trash since I arrived. I am the problem. Yes, Elias shouted, finally losing control. Yes, you're the problem. You've always been the problem. Always embarrassing me with your poverty, with your cheap clothes, with the way you talk, with your very
existence.
The entire ballroom fell silent. Even the background music had stopped. 300 people held their breath, witnesses to how a son was destroying his mother with words that could never be erased.
I
Never asked you to make all those sacrifices, Elias continued, his voice broken, but full of venom. I never asked you to work cleaning houses. I never asked you to live like you were poor. You did it because you wanted to, because you enjoyed being the martyr, the poor suffering mother. And now you want me to carry that guilt forever. Every word was a stab, but the worst was still to come. I wished 1,000 times that my father hadn't left us.
not.
Because I needed him, but because then maybe you would have had someone else to cling to, someone else to suffocate with. Your pathetic love. The tears finally burst from my eyes. I couldn't hold them back anymore. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of awakening, of finally seeing with total clarity who my son really was. Elias, I whispered. You don't know what you're saying.
I
Know exactly what I'm saying, he replied. I'm saying I'm tired of you. Tired of your expectations. Tired of your constant need for validation. Tired of feeling like I owe you something just because you decided to be a single mother. Tiffany put a hand on his shoulder, encouraging him to continue. Genevieve smiled subtly. They were enjoying this. They were enjoying seeing me destroyed. And, if you want to know the truth, Elias continued, moving closer, if you really took that necklace, I honestly wouldn't be surprised because you've always been
like this.
always taking my time, taking my energy, taking my whole life to fill the emptiness of yours. I raised my hand then, not to hit him, just to stop him, just to make the words cease. But Elias interpreted the gesture differently. What are you going to do? He yelled. Are you going to hit me?
Are
You going to show everyone here what kind of person you really are? And then he did something I can never forget. Something that changed everything forever. Elias raised his own hand and slapped me. A dry, loud slap that made my head snap sideways. The sound echoed in the absolute silence of the ballroom. Someone screamed. A woman let out a choked gasp. A man muttered something in disbelief. But I didn't feel physical
pain.
I felt something far worse. I felt the last thread connecting us snap forever. I stood paralyzed, my cheek burning and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The silence in the ballroom was supple. 300 guests had just witnessed a son strike his mother at his own wedding. And no one said anything. No one moved to defend me. No one intervened. Elias took a step back, staring at his own hand as if he couldn't believe what he had just done. His face palled. His lips trembled. But he didn't apologize. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He just looked at me with a mix of horror and resentment, as if I were the one to blame for provoking his violence. Tiffany broke the silence first. She rushed to Elias and hugged him as if he were the victim who needed comfort. It's okay, honey, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. She provoked you. Everyone saw it. She was attacking you. A lie. I had done nothing but raise a hand in a gesture of stopping him, but the truth no longer mattered. What mattered was the narrative they were building. I was the poor, troubled mother. He was the successful son who had finally defended himself. Genevieve approached then, placing herself between Elias and me, like a protective shield. I think it's best if you leave, Naomi, she said, her voice cold and controlled. You've clearly had too much to drink, or you're too upset. We don't want any more unpleasant scenes. For everyone's sake, especially Elias's, you should go now. Had too much to drink. They hadn't even served me a glass of wine. But that would be the story they told later. The drunken, violent mother who ruined her son's wedding and had to be expelled after attacking him. I touched my swollen cheek and looked at my son one last time. I searched his eyes for any trace of the child who used to hug me. The teenager who promised to take care of me when he grew up, the young man who called me his hero. But that child, no. longer existed. Maybe he had never truly existed. Maybe he had always been a projection of my own hopes and sacrifices. You're right, Genevieve. I finally said, my voice strangely calm. I'm leaving, but not because I'm drunk or upset. I'm leaving because I just understood something very important.
I
Looked Elias directly in the eye. I just understood that I wasted 35 years of my life raising a stranger. Someone who values appearances more than love, money, more than loyalty, and the acceptance of superficial people more than the sacrifice of the person who gave him life. Mom, Elias started, but I raised my hand to silence him. No, you no longer have the right to call me that. A mother is someone who matters, someone whose love is valued, someone who is defended when unjustly attacked. You just proved that I am none of those things to you.
I
Bent down and picked up the things Genevieve had dumped from my purse. The photograph of little Elias had fallen to the floor. I picked it up, looked at it one last time, and placed it on the table. Keep it, I told him. It's the only memory I want to leave here. The image of a child who no longer exists.
I
Turned around and started walking toward the exit. Every step was liberation and agony at the same time. I could feel everyone's eyes following me. I heard the murmurs starting to rise like a chorus of judgment, but I kept walking, with my head held high, refusing to run, refusing to show any more weakness.
when
I reached the exit. I heard Tiffany's voice behind me loud and clear so everyone could hear. Well, that was dramatic. Poor Elias. Some kids just aren't lucky with the families they're stuck with. There was laughter. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. And that was the last thing I heard before stepping out of that nightmare garden. I walked down the dark street without a fixed destination.
I
Hadn't called a cab. I hadn't planned how to get home. I just needed to get away. Away from those people. Away from that son I no longer recognized. Away from the life I had built based on lies I had convinced myself were true. I walked for 2 hours under the street.
lights.
My feet ached in those low-heeled shoes I had polished so carefully.
My
Cheek throbbed where Elias had struck me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest, a pain so profound I felt like I would drown. I finally reached a bus stop and sat on the plastic bench. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. There were no buses running, but I didn't care. I just needed to sit
down.
I just needed to breathe. I took out my wallet and counted the cash I had, $30. But in my bank accounts, the accounts Elias never knew existed, I had almost $2 million waiting for me. Properties in my name, investments that a financial advisor had managed secretly for decades. For 35 years I had lived as if I were poor to teach my son values. But that lesson had failed spectacularly. He hadn't learned humility.
He had learned contempt.
He hadn't learned gratitude. He had learned
Shame.
now it was time to live for myself, to be who I really was, to stop hiding behind the facade of poverty I had built with the best intentions, but the worst results. When the sun began to rise, I walked to an ATM. I withdrew the maximum allowed, $500. Then I walked to a modest but clean hotel. I rented a room for 1 week.
I
Took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away not just the grime, but also the remnants of my previous life. I looked at myself in the mirror. My cheek was purple and swollen. I would have an ugly bruise for weeks. But when I looked into my eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw determination.
I saw strength.
I saw a woman who had just freed herself from chains she had put on herself. For the next few days, I didn't leave that hotel room. I ordered food. Delivery. I kept the curtains closed. I let my phone die and didn't charge it.
I
Needed that silence. I needed that empty space where I could think without the weight of 35 years of sacrifice crushing
my chest.
On the third day, I finally sat down at the business center computer. The time had come to face the reality of who I really was. Not the self-sacrificing mother who cleaned floors. Not the humble woman who hid behind second-hand clothes, but Naomi, heiress to a considerable fortune, owner of properties in 3 different states, and a woman who had chosen invisibility when she could have chosen power.
I
Logged into my bank accounts for the first time in months. The balance took my breath away. $2,200,000. The properties my mother had left me had increased in value. The conservative investments that a financial advisor had handled on my behalf for years had grown silently. I had been a millionaire all this time while pretending to count pennies for the bus. And my son never knew it, never appreciated it, never valued the real sacrifice I had made in hiding this truth to teach him humility. I called the financial advisor, an older man named Charles, who had worked with my mother and respected my wish to keep the accounts private all these years. "Mrs. Thacker," he said, surprised when he finally recognized my voice. "It's been years since our last conversation. I thought maybe you'd forgotten we existed." "No, Charles, I was just living another life. But that life is over. I need your help to start anew." "Of course. How can I assist you?"
I want to sell one of the properties, the smallest one.
"I need immediate liquidity, and I want you to research investment opportunities, something related to luxury events, exclusive event planning, that kind of industry." There was a
Pause.
"Pardon my curiosity, but that's a radical change from your previous style. Are you sure?" "Completely sure. I also need you to help me change my documentation, my legal name. I want to use my full maiden name, Naomi Maeve Thacker. I want any search for Naomi Thacker alone to yield no immediate results.
You can do that with the right
Contacts and the correct legal procedures. Yes, it will take a few months, but it's possible. May I ask why?" "Because the woman who was Naomi died 3 days ago at a wedding, and I don't want anyone from that life to find me easily." Charles asked no further questions. He was a discreet professional. That was precisely why my mother had trusted him. The property sold in 2 weeks. I received $50,000.
Clear.
With that money, I moved to another city not far, but enough to start over. I rented a modern condo in an elegant building. I bought new clothes, not flashy but high quality. Classic cuts in neutral tones that whispered subtle wealth. I cut my hair into a modern style that took years off.
Me.
I got facial treatments. I hired a personal trainer, not because I wanted to look different for others, but because I wanted to look different for myself. I wanted to look in the mirror and not see the woman who had allowed herself to be humiliated at a wedding. I wanted to see someone new, someone stronger. During the first 6 months, Elias tried to contact me. He called my former jobs, went to my old apartment, talked to neighbors, but I had vanished like smoke. I had paid the full remaining month's rent and left without a forwarding address. My belongings, all those cheap possessions I had accumulated over years, I donated to a charity organization. I took nothing from the past. Nothing except the most painful lesson of my life. 1 year after the wedding, Charles contacted me with an opportunity. A luxury event planning company was looking for investors. The owner wanted to expand but needed capital. Sterling Vance was his name. A man in his 50s with experience organizing events for millionaires, but without the resources to take his business to the next level. We met at an upscale cafe. He arrived with a portfolio full of photographs of events he had organized. Weddings at private vineyards, charity dinners at museums, corporate parties on yachts. Everything was beautiful, exclusive, exactly the kind of world Tiffany and Genevieve moved in. "Mrs. Thacker," Sterling began, "Charles spoke highly of you. He says you're interested in the luxury events business." "Very much so," I replied, calmly sipping my coffee. "But not just as a silent investor. I want to be involved. I want to learn the business from the inside out." He raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Most investors just want to see monthly reports and dividends. You want to get your hands dirty.
Exactly.
I have the time. I have the resources. And I have very personal reasons for understanding this world from the inside. I didn't give him details. I didn't tell him about Elias, about the slap, about the humiliation. That remained buried in the past. But Sterling was smart.
He saw something in
my eyes that told him I wasn't just any investor. I was someone with a mission. I invested $500,000 in his company. In return, I received a 40% stake and an active role in decision-making. Over the next 2 years, I worked alongside Sterling, learning every aspect of the business. How to negotiate with luxury vendors, how to deal with millionaire clients, how to create experiences that people would remember for a lifetime. But more importantly, I learned the names, the families, the social circles, the small exclusive world of high society. I memorized who moved in which circles, which families organized which events, which last names opened which doors. And yes, I researched Tiffany's family, Genevieve, and their entire social circle. I discovered that Genevieve Vance was a member of 3 exclusive clubs and organized an annual charity gala to raise funds for a children's hospital. I found out her husband had lost a considerable amount of money in bad investments 2 years earlier, although they maintain the appearances of wealth. I learned that Tiffany worked as a public relations specialist for luxury companies, but earned much less than her lifestyle suggested. I also discovered something about Elias that broke my heart in a different way. He had lost his job 6 months after the wedding. The company he worked for had shut down operations. And with his modest resume and no real connections in Tiffany's world, he hadn't found anything equivalent. He was now working in positions far below his education. Security guard at events, occasional private driver, jobs that paid the bills but crushed his ego. Tiffany, according to my sources, was increasingly distant. Fights were frequent. She chastised him for not having the same economic standing as her family. She chastised him for not being able to maintain the lifestyle she expected. She chastised him essentially for not being rich enough to deserve her love. Ironic. Elias had given up a millionaire mother for a wife who despised him for not having money. But I felt no satisfaction with that information. I only felt a strange emptiness. A part of me, the maternal part that never fully dies, wanted to call him, wanted to tell him I could help him, that he still had a mother who would love him unconditionally. But the other part, the part that remembered the slap, the accusations, the humiliation in front of 300 people, that part held me firm in my silence. The years passed like pages of a book. I had finally started writing for myself. 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Each one transformed me a little more. Sterling's company, which was now my company too, grew to become one of the most prestigious in luxury event organization. Our name, Vancer Events, was synonymous with elegance, exclusivity, and absolute perfection. We handled weddings where the minimum budget was $200,000, corporate dinners for Fortune 500 companies, charity galas where each table cost $50,000. I had gone from being the invisible woman at a wedding to being the woman who decided who was important enough to be invited to the city's most exclusive events. The irony was not lost on me. Over time, my participation in the company increased. Sterling, now in his late 50s, began talking about retirement. He offered to sell me his share of the company. We negotiated for months and finally reached an agreement. I would become the majority owner with a 75% stake. He would retain 25% and work as a consultant, but the real control would be mine. I invested additional capital in the transaction and the expansion. We opened a second office on the West Coast. We hired the best event planners in the country. We formed strategic alliances with 5-star hotels, exclusive vineyards, and historic mansions available only for private events. I, the woman who had cleaned floors for years, now decided who could access the most coveted spaces in the world of luxury. But I never lost sight of my true objective. I never forgot why I had entered this world. Every event I organized, every new client I attended to, every connection I made was one step closer to the moment I knew would eventually come. The moment when my past and my present would collide. That moment arrived in the 8th year. I received a call from a potential client, a woman named Vivian Baker, director of a foundation for children with chronic illnesses, was organizing an exclusive charity gala. Only 200 guests, the wealthiest, most influential, most powerful. The goal was to raise $5 million in a single night. I need the best, Vivian said during our first meeting. This event must be impeccable. The guests are people who have seen everything, attended everything. I need to surprise them. I need them to open their wallets generously. What is your budget for the organization? I asked, taking notes on my tablet. $100,000 for the event production, but that doesn't include the space. I'm still looking for the perfect location. I smiled. I have exactly the place. A historic mansion on the hill, spectacular gardens, a panoramic view of the city. It has only hosted 3 events in the last 5 years because the owners are extremely selective, but I have an excellent relationship with them. I can secure the space. Vivian leaned forward, interested. How much would it cost? $4,000 just for the night's rental, but trust me, it's worth every penny. Your guests will never have been there. It will be truly exclusive. She didn't hesitate for a second. Done. You have the contract, Mrs. Thacker. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in every detail of the gala. The theme would be timeless elegance decor in champagne, gold and pearl white tones, centerpieces with imported orchids, a 7-course dinner prepared by a 2-Michelin star chef, live music from a symphony orchestra, a lighting system that would transform the gardens into a dreamscape. I also reviewed the guest list. Vivian sent it to me so I could coordinate the personalized invitations. When I opened the Excel file and started reading the names, my heart stopped. Row 42, Genevieve Vance. There she was, the woman who had accused me of being a thief, the woman who had orchestrated my humiliation on the guest list for the year's most exclusive event, an event I was organizing. I took a deep breath. After 8 years, the universe was giving me exactly what I had been waiting for without even knowing it. An opportunity. Not for revenge, because revenge was vulgar, and I was no longer that woman, but an opportunity to show that woman, who the person she had despised had really been. I continued reading the list. I didn't find Tiffany's name, nor Elias's, only Genevieve and her husband. It made sense. They were the ones with the real social connections. Tiffany and Elias, according to my information, no longer even moved in those circles. Their marriage had deteriorated so much that they barely attended family events together. The day of the gala arrived after 8 weeks of obsessive preparation. Everything had to be perfect, not because I wanted to impress Genevieve specifically, but because my reputation depended on perfection in every event. But I won't deny that there was a special savor in knowing she would be there. I arrived at the mansion 6 hours before the event. My team of 20 people was already working. Florists placed the orchids. Lighting technicians ran tests. Waiters practiced coordinated service. The chef supervised every detail in the temporary kitchen we had set up. I wore a floor-length champagne-colored dress, an elegant cut that had cost $8,000. My hair was pulled back in a sophisticated bun. I wore the diamond earrings I had bought for myself the year before. Designer shoes, a delicate Swiss watch on my wrist. I looked exactly like what I was, a successful, powerful, elegant woman. Nothing remained of the Naomi who wore second-hand clothes. At 6 p.m., the guests began to arrive. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Drivers opened doors. Men in tuxedos and women in hot couture gowns walked down the carpet we had laid from the parking lot to the main entrance. I stood at the door with Vivian personally greeting every guest. It was part of my role as the principal organizer. I wanted to ensure that every detail of the experience was impeccable from the moment they set foot on the property. And then I saw her.
Genevieve.
Vance stepped out of a black Mercedes. She wore an appropriately emerald-colored dress covered in rhinestones. Her hair, now grayer than before, was styled in perfect waves. She wore the same diamond necklace I remembered from the wedding. Her husband, a completely gay-haired man now, accompanied her with a bored expression. She walked toward the entrance with that confidence that only old money provides. Her eyes evaluated everything, the decor, the lighting, the other guests looking for flaws, looking for reasons to criticize. When she stood in front of me, her eyes passed over my face without any recognition. Of course, she didn't
Recognize me.
8 years had passed. I was a completely different version of myself, and she probably hadn't even thought about me since that night.
I had
Been so insignificant in her world that my face had completely faded from her memory. Good evening, I said with a professional smile. Welcome. I'm Naomi Thker, the principal event organizer. I extended my hand.
She shook it briefly.
With the same weak grasp I remembered from years ago. The venue is lovely, she said in an evaluative tone. Vivian spoke highly of your services. I'm pleased to hear that. I hope the evening exceeds your expectations. She nodded and moved on without giving me a second glance. Her husband hadn't even spoken. I remained in my place, smiling, greeting the next guest, behaving with the absolute professionalism I had cultivated for years. But something inside me had changed. Seeing her there, not recognizing me, not even remembering. The pain she had caused me filled me with a cold clarity. This woman had been so cruel to me because to her I wasn't a real person. I was an object, a nuisance, something so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be remembered. And now, 8 years later, I
controlled her experience tonight.
I decided what she would eat, where she would sit, how she would be treated.
I
had all the power, but I wasn't going to use it to humiliate her. I wasn't going to stoop that low. Instead, I was going to give her the most perfect night of her life, and at the end, when it was all over, she would know exactly who had made that perfection possible. The gala proceeded with the precision of a Swiss clock. Every course of the dinner was served at the exact moment. The orchestra played pieces that made conversations flow effortlessly. The lights in the gardens created a magical atmosphere that made even the most cynical millionaires pull out their phones to take pictures. The speeches were moving without being long. Auctions for exclusive items generated increasingly higher bids. I oversaw everything from the shadows, moving behind the scenes like an invisible orchestra conductor. I communicated with my team through a small earpiece. I solved problems before they became crisis. When a guest spilled red wine on the tablecloth, we had a replacement at their table in under 3 minutes. When the microphones started making a strange noise during a speech, our sound technician replaced it in seconds. Everything flowed as if it were magic, but it was work. Years of experience translated into silent excellence. I observed Genevieve throughout the night. She was seated at one of the best tables near the stage, but not so close as to be uncomfortable. She chatted animatedly with other women in her social circle. She laughed with that crystal laugh I remembered. She also participated in the auctions, bidding $20,000 for a weekend at a private Caribbean resort. Her husband seemed more interested in his phone than the evening, but that wasn't my problem. Toward the end of the night, after it was announced that they had raised $6,200,000, exceeding the goal by more than $1 million, Vivian took the stage for the final speech. I want to thank everyone here for your extraordinary generosity. She began in an emotional voice. Thanks to you, hundreds of children will receive the treatment they need. But tonight would not have been possible without one person in particular, a woman whose vision, dedication, and perfectionism have transformed this gala into something truly unforgettable. Naomi, please come up to the stage. My heart started beating faster. I hadn't expected public recognition. I usually preferred to remain in the background. Naomi, please come up to the stage. Vivian continued. I had no choice. All the guests turned to look for me. I walked toward the stage with a professional smile. I climbed the steps and stood next to Vivian. The 200 guests applauded. The stage lights illuminated me completely. I was the center of attention for all those powerful people, including Genevieve. Naomi is not only an exceptional event organizer, Vivian said. She is a visionary. When I told her about this gala, she immediately understood the importance of the cause. In fact, in addition to her impeccable work, Naomi has made a personal donation of $100,000 to our foundation. More applause. Some guests stood up. It was true. I had made that donation the previous week, not for publicity. I had done it because I finally had the resources to help others, and those sick children were not to blame for my personal problems. From the stage, I could clearly see Genevieve. Her face showed surprise. She was starting to study me more intently. There was something in her eyes, a spark of recognition that hadn't quite fully formed. I was an elegant stranger, but there was something in my face, in my gestures that felt vaguely familiar to her. Thank you, Vivian, I said, taking the microphone. It has been an honor to work on this event. Seeing so much generosity gathered in one place reminds me that while money can divide people, it can also unite them when used for the right purpose. I hope everyone remembers this night, not only for the event's elegance, but for the lives you helped save. I stepped down from the stage to applause. Several guests approached to congratulate me, gave me business cards, asked about future events, treating me with the respect only given to someone they consider an equal. And then Genevieve approached. Mrs. Thacker, she said, her smile now looking less confident. The event has been extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Thank you, Genevieve. I'm glad you enjoyed it. She looked at me more intensely now. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for something. Forgive my boldness, but your face looks incredibly familiar. Have we met before? Perhaps at another event. Perhaps, I replied in a neutral tone. I attend many events in my line of work. No, it's not that, she insisted, frowning. It's something more personal. Your voice, too. There's something. She paused. I saw the exact moment the memory began to return. Her eyes widened slightly. Her mouth dropped open a little. Color began to drain from her face. You are, she began to say, her voice trembling. Naomi Maeve Thacker. I completed for her. Luxury event organizer, businesswoman, philanthropist. And yes, Genevieve, I am. Also the woman you accused of stealing your emerald necklace 8 years ago at your daughter's wedding. The woman you humiliated in front of 300 guests. The mother whom her own son struck while you watched with satisfaction. The silence between us was so thick it could be cut with a knife. She took a step back, as if my words were physical blows. My God, she whispered. It can't be. You were poor. Yes. Or so you thought. Because I looked poor, dressed poor, acted poor. But it turns out appearances are deceiving. Genevieve. It turns out the woman you despised for wearing second-hand clothes was a millionaire. It turns out the mother you accused of stealing had more money in the bank than you and your family combined. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her husband approached, then noticing her expression of shock. What's wrong, dear? He asked, with concern. Nothing that concerns you, Genevieve replied without taking her eyes off me. Leave us alone. He obeyed, confused but compliant. Genevieve and I stood there, 2 women separated by 8 years and an abyss of decisions and consequences. I didn't know, she finally said, her voice weak. If I had known you had money. There it is. I interrupted, my voice cold. If I had known you had money, those are exactly the words that confirm everything I thought of you that
night.
Your respect is not based on a person's character. It's based on the size of their bank account, she swallowed. It wasn't personal. Of course, it was personal. It was deeply personal. You treated me like trash because you assumed I was poor.
You allowed your daughter to hide me at
a table next to the kitchen. You accused me of stealing without any proof. And then you watched my son strike me and said nothing. Worse still, you were glad because to you I wasn't a person. I was a problem that was finally resolving itself. Tears began to form in Genevieve's eyes, but they weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of shame, of being discovered, of having to face the social consequences of having mistreated someone who turned out to be important. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. If I could go back in time, but you can't. No one can.
And you
know what the saddest thing of all is, Genevieve? That your apology isn't even for treating me badly. Your apology is for making the mistake of treating someone with money badly. If I had truly been poor as you thought, you would still believe you acted correctly. She couldn't deny it because we both knew it was true. Where is the necklace? I asked then. The famous emerald necklace. You found it, didn't you? Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. It was in my car. I had left it there before the ceremony and completely forgot about it. I found it 2 days after the wedding. So, for 8 years, you have known that you accused an innocent woman, that you allowed her son to strike her for a crime she never committed, and you never tried to apologize. You never tried to make things right. She lowered her gaze.
I
didn't know how to find you. You disappeared.
A lie.
You could have found me if you had truly wanted to, but you didn't because you didn't care. I was nobody to you. Just collateral damage in your perfect world. What are you going to do now? She asked, her voice fearful. Are you going to ruin my reputation? Are you going to tell everyone what I did? I looked at her for a long moment. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing her social position, her reputation, her place in that superficial world she valued so much. And in that moment, I had all the
power.
I could destroy her with a single conversation. I could tell Viv tell the other guests. I could make the story of the woman who falsely accused someone of theft spread throughout all the social circles she frequented. But I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to do anything, Genevieve. I finally said, I'm not going to ruin your reputation. I'm not going to seek revenge because doing that would turn me into someone like you, and I've worked too hard over these 8 years to become someone better. She looked at me with surprise and confusion. Then why did you tell me all this? Why reveal yourself now?
Because I
needed you to know. I needed you to see with your own eyes that the woman you despised, who you humiliated, who you treated like trash, was someone valuable. Not because she has money, but because she always was.
The money only
changed how you see me. It didn't change who I am. Genevieve remained silent. Tears ran freely down her face, now ruining her carefully applied makeup. Your son, she finally said, her voice trembling. Elias, does he know you're alive? Does he know where you are? No, and I don't want you to tell him, but he has been looking for you. Tiffany left him 4 years ago. He lost everything. His job, his marriage, his pride. He works in temporary jobs. The last time I saw him a few months ago, he was working as a security guard at events. He asked me if I knew anything about you.
He was desperate.
Hearing that should have moved me. I should have felt that maternal pang of wanting to rescue my son from his suffering. But what I felt was something more complex. I felt pity. Yes, but I also felt the firmness of knowing that some decisions have permanent consequences. Elias made his choice that night. I said, my voice even. He chose the world. That Tiffany and you represented. He chose appearances over real love. He chose to strike his mother instead of defending her. And now he lives with the consequences of that choice. I cannot
Save him from that.
I shouldn't even try. But you're his mother, Genevieve insisted. He was confused. He was young. He made a terrible mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation. It showed me who he really was. And it also freed me. It freed me from living a lie, from sacrificing myself for someone who didn't value that sacrifice. For 35 years I lived for
Him.
Now I live for myself. And I'm finally happy.
Genevieve looked at me.
With an expression I couldn't fully decipher. There was admiration mixed with envy, sadness mixed with regret. I wish I could be like you, she said softly. I wish I had the courage to live on my own terms. It's never too late to start, I replied. But it requires more than courage.
It
requires being willing to let go of the things you thought defined you. Status, appearances, the approval of others.
I
only achieved it because all of that was violently taken from me. You still have the option to let go by choice.
She
nodded slowly, as if considering my words for the first time in her life. I'm going to go now, I told her. I have to supervise the final details of the event. But before I leave, I need you to understand something very clearly. If you tell Elias that you saw me, if you give him any clue about where to find me, you will never hire my services again, and I will ensure that no other luxury event company in this city works with you either. I have those connections now. I have that power. It wasn't an empty threat. It was simply the truth, and she knew it. I won't say anything she promised. You have my word. Your word isn't worth much to me, Genevieve, but I will trust your instinct for self-preservation. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I walked away from her and returned to work. I had final details to supervise, guests to bid farewell to with elegance, a team to coordinate for the Tirone that would begin in 2 hours. My personal life could wait, my professionalism never. The gala ended at midnight. The last guests left, satisfied, full of good food, good wine, and the satisfaction of having contributed to a noble cause. Vivian hugged me with tears of gratitude. She promised to recommend me to all her contacts. She told me it had been the best gala they had ever organized. When everyone finally left, I stayed alone in the illuminated gardens. My team was efficiently dismantling everything. I just needed a moment. A moment to process everything that had happened. 8 years. It had taken 8 years to reach this moment. 8 years of rebuilding myself from scratch, of learning to value myself instead of seeking validation in others, of building a small but respectable empire, of becoming someone who mattered not for being someone's mother, but for simply being me. And now, after facing Genevieve, after closing that circle, I felt strangely empty, not satisfied, as I had imagined, just empty. Because the truth was that revenge, even the revenge of success, doesn't fill the void left by betrayed love. Mrs. Thker, one of my coordinators, called to me. There's someone at the entrance who insists on speaking with you. He says it's personal. My heart stopped. Genevieve had spoken. She had broken her promise. Within hours, Elias was here. Tell him I'm not available, I replied. Automatically. I already did, but he says he won't leave until he speaks with you. He says he recognized you during the event. He's one of the security guards we hired for the parking lot. There it was. The moment I had avoided for 8 years. The moment that part of me had been waiting for and part of me had been dreading in equal measure. Tell him to wait in the rose garden, I said. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I needed those 5 minutes to prepare myself to remember who I was now, to fortify the walls I had built around my heart. Because I knew that when I saw Elias, when I looked into those eyes that had once been my entire reason for existence, something inside me would want to yield, would want to forgive, would want to be a mother again. But I couldn't. I shouldn't. I walked toward the rose garden with slow, deliberate steps. The moon illuminated the path. I could see his silhouette waiting for me. He was no longer the arrogant young man in the expensive tuxedo who had married 8 years ago. He was a 37-year-old man with slumped shoulders dressed in the gray uniform of a security guard, his face marked by years of regret and struggle. When I stood in front of him, we looked at each other in silence. His eyes were red. He had been crying. "Mom," he said, his voice broken, "I've been looking for you for 8 years. I am not your mom," I replied in a cold voice I didn't recognize as my own. "That woman died at your wedding. You hit her until she was gone." He flinched, as if my words were physical blows.
"I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry."
Not a single day goes by that I don't regret it, that I don't hate myself for what I did. Your regret is yours, Elias.
It is not
my place to alleviate it. I just need you to know the truth, he said desperately. Tiffany manipulated me. Her mother pressured me. I was scared of losing everything. I was confused. I was an idiot. But I loved you. I always loved you. I laughed then, a bitter laugh that sounded cruel even to my own ears. You loved me, but not enough to
defend me.
Not enough to believe in me. Not enough to choose me when I needed you most. You were right, he said, letting his shoulders drop completely. You were right about everything. I valued the wrong things. I chased a world that never truly wanted me. Tiffany left me as soon as I stopped being useful.
Her family discarded me
like trash. And I lost the only person who loved me unconditionally. Not unconditionally. I corrected him. I had conditions. I expected respect.
I
expected loyalty. I expected love. And you didn't fulfill any of them. Let me make it up to you, he pleaded, taking a step toward me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that I've changed, that I've learned, that I finally understand what I lost. I looked at him for a long moment. I saw the child I had raised, the teenager I had protected, the young man I had loved with every fiber of my being.
But I also
saw the man who had betrayed me in the most painful way possible. No, Elias, I finally said, I am not going to give you that chance because I know what would happen. I would forgive you. I would take you back into my life. And eventually, when you no longer needed me, when you found something better, you would hurt me again.
Because
that's what people do. They hurt the ones who love them the most because they know they will always be there. I won't. You would do it. Maybe not intentionally, but you would. And I have worked too hard to rebuild myself to break myself for you again.
Tears ran
down his face. Please, Mom. You're the only thing I have left. I've lost everything else. And that, I replied, is exactly the wrong reason to seek me out. You seek me out because you ran out of options, not because you value me, but because you need me. And I am no longer available to be needed, only to be valued. Mom, please, he started to beg. Goodbye, Elias, I said, turning away. Live your life. Learn from your
mistakes.
Become a better man. But do it without me, because I've fulfilled my
part.
I've given you everything I had to give. Now, it's my turn to live for myself. I walked away from him. I heard his sobs behind me. I heard him call my name over and over. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking forward, toward the life I had built without him, toward the woman I had become on my own. And even though my heart broke with every step, I knew I was doing the right
thing.
Some wounds are too deep to heal. Some bridges are too burned to rebuild. And some people, no matter how much you love them, need to stay in the past so you can keep moving toward the future. That night, I returned to my elegant condo. I took off the $8,000 dress. I washed off my makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw a 63-year-old woman who had finally found herself. She was not the perfect mother she had imagined. She didn't have the happy family she had dreamed of building, but she had something more valuable. She had
dignity.
She had self-respect. She had a life that was truly hers. And that, finally, was enough. Did you like my story and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.